My guest this morning is Dr. Reynaldo Anderson. He is an associate professor and director of graduate studies at Temple University. Reynaldo is currently the executive director and co-founder of the Black Speculative Arts Movement, BSAM, an international network of artists, intellectuals, creatives, and activists. He is the co-editor of the following anthologies and journals: Afrofuturism 2.0, The Rise of Astro-Blackness and the Black Speculative Arts Movement, Black Futurity, Art+Design, Lexington Books 2015-2019, Cosmic Underground, a Grimoire of Black Speculative Discontent, Cedar Grove Publishing 2018, Black Lives, Black Politics, Black Futures, a special issue of TOPIA, TOPIA, Canadian Journal of Cultural Studies 2018, and When is Wakanda? Afrofuturism and Dark Speculative Futurity, the Journal of Future Studies 2019. He is also the author of numerous articles on Africana Studies and Communication Studies and helped conceive the joint BSAM and New York Live Arts Curating the End of the World online exhibitions 2020-21. Reynaldo is the co-editor of the Lovecraft Country Reader, forthcoming in 2021. He has presented papers in the areas of communications, Africana Studies, Afrofuturism, and critical theory in the U.S. and abroad. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, none other than my good brother, Dr. Reynaldo Anderson. Dr. Anderson, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am wonderful now that I can hear your voice and it's coming through this system. I get a kick whenever everything is working the way it's supposed to be working.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you said, you rose early like a sphinx. Needless to say, you see, I got a kick out of that. I remember those days. And I think, and I think our other Alpha brothers on the line remember those days as well. So I'll tell you what, we have a lot to unpack. Oh, that's what I didn't say. If you didn't catch it, he is a member of the greatest fraternity in the world. None other than the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, that old gold and black. And I'm telling you, you all can say what you want, but Alpha Phi Alpha is the greatest fraternity in the world. Now, of course, we're biased, but the fact of the matter is, it is. So I'll tell you what, there is a lot to unpack here in terms of these words that we talked about here in the bio, in terms of Afrofuturism and speculative futurity and grimoire of Black speculative discontent. There are a lot of words that we're going to unpack, but we're going to go back to the beginning. Another thing, he is also now the position at UWP. Talk a little bit about you, executive director. Is that it? No, what is the actual title at UWP? Because we're going to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, editorial director.
Editorial director. There we go. Editorial director at UWP. And those of you know that a few of my guests, many of my guests, we work together and we serve together on UWP, Universal Right Publications. And a few weeks ago, the owner, the CEO of that company, Ayo Sakai, she was with me as we interviewed Dr. Dove. Ayo was actually up in the area at the time, so she had a chance to pop into the studio on the day that we were interviewing Dr. Dove, who's also down at Temple University. So let's kind of roll back to the start in terms of where did all of this in your mind start in terms of this interest in us as Black people?
Are you talking for Afrofuturism? Oh, man. Well, I would say this, that its historical legacy goes back to an important figure in our history named Martin Delany in the 19th century. And the easiest way to explain who he was is kind of Martin Delany was the Malcolm X to Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass. In the 19th century, he's sometimes known as the father of Black nationalism. He served in the Union Army. He was an explorer, a scientist. And one of the things that was said about Martin Delany, I believe, by Douglass is, Douglass said, I'm every morning I wake up and look in the mirror, I'm happy to be a man, but Martin Delaney would wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, I'm happy to be a black man.
Well, I know that's right. Go ahead.
And Delaney wrote a book that was kind of a counter to Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. You know, Uncle Tom being a pious Christian character and so forth, but Martin Delaney wrote a series of pieces that were collectively known as The Hut and Blake. And this series that became a novel was the first speculative novel in the African American literary tradition that dealt with a novel about a slave revolution here in the United States, where in the desire to establish a nation state. And one of these things, I think that Delaney, why he wrote it, of course, this is inspired by the Haitian Revolution.
Okay.
In the 19th century. And Delaney just, for the most part, for most of his life, never believed that black Americans would find true equality and liberty in this country, you know, in terms of where they'd be able to protect themselves for their interests. And so Delaney is like the great-grandfather, what we now call Afrofuturism. And then a couple generations later, you get W.B. Du Bois,
right?
Who writes a short story in the book Darkwater. And Du Bois writes Darkwater towards the end of the Spanish flu pandemic in 1920s when it's published.
Okay.
And the short story dealt with a black man and a white woman who believe they're the only survivors of a catastrophe in New York City, and begin to develop this relationship because this comet has flown over New York and killed everybody but the two of them. And absent the presence of white supremacy temporarily, they think about developing a relationship. And the point of the story is, as people come to the sea and find out that they are alive, things go back to where they were. But what Du Bois was trying to say in the short story, the only time basically black people and white people get along is when the catastrophes happen. After the catastrophe, nothing changes.
Well, you know, and I'm going to pause for 1 second there. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but I have to agree with him. I'll tell you why, because 9/11, that was the one time, I mean, we filled Yankee Stadium and these stadiums, and it didn't matter what color you were, your gender, your sexual, it didn't matter. None of that. Everybody was jammed up in Yankee Stadium for whatever they believed in or whatever was considered their prayer or positive thoughts. We were all up in there together, and we were working together. So I have to agree with Du Bois, because not long after that, like, we went right back into our same old pattern.
Yeah. And so fast forward up to, say, around the 1960s, a jazz impresario, free jazz, great performer, Sun Ra, and his orchestra become like the father of this present day movement in terms of, you know, their attire and the type of music that they were playing, which was considered so avant-garde and way out. Even a lot of people in jazz couldn't identify with it. And it's interesting, though, that his music now has become popular again,
Correct.
A generation after his death, because of some of the ideas he's espousing in those albums and some of the concepts. And but we weren't calling it Afrofuturism then. And then in the early 90s, and I always talk about the late 80s, early 90s was a key transitional period of thinking in this country, where you had emerging scholars like Dr. Asante develop his concept on Afrocentricity. You had the appearance of the work of Cornel West, the appearance of the work of people like Bell Hooks, Black Feminist Theory, Contemporary Black Feminist Theory, and others. And in New York, he was young then, I joke with him, a gentleman by the name of Mark Derry, in conversation with three other black intellectuals, the science fiction writer Sam Delaney, the professor Tricia Rose, and the writer and critic Greg Tate, around this concept where Mark was looking at the changes that are going on in New York, especially within Black culture, and he noticed, this convergence between technology and art and graphic design. And he was standing in his apartment, and then he thought of the word Afrofuturism. Okay, and he coined that word, and that's how the word came about in American terms. Now, where we are now, several years ago, after I had finished doing wrapping up some research early in my career, where I was writing on the Black Panther Party.
Right.
I was at a conference and was engaged in conversation with Dr. Alondra Nelson, then from Columbia. And it was during this conference that that when we think about that word, we're really in Afrofuturism 2.0. And what I meant by that is the fact that social media and other advancements in technology have put us in a different place in terms of some things to think about in relation to the past, present, and future. And as one of my friends said, if you're ever familiar with, Amiri Baraka,
right,
once wrote a book called and said we were blues people. Well, we're not really blues people anymore because of kind of where we are now, early in the 21st century with they're talking about transhumanism, human augmentation, redesign of the human being with genetics, blockchain technology, and all these other things are coming together. We're different people now for this kind of transitionary moment of where we are in history. And so that's why more and more people are becoming familiar with what we're calling Afrofuturism now to describe this moment in terms of where we're thinking about in relation to where we've been in the past, and how do we locate ourselves in the future.
How do you feel in terms of, or your thoughts about whether or not the message or the understanding is getting out to the masses? In other words, the intellectuals may understand it, but in terms of your layperson or someone, in the urban area or the ghetto area or the, inner city, how is that message getting out to them? Or is it, and we're just like, they don't realize what it is, like they're acting it, but not knowing what it is that they're actually acting?
Well, because, they ain't had somebody come out with a song like "Make My Funk the P-Funk" yet. George Clinton. I tell them, Janelle Monáe is all right, but she's not George Clinton. Back in the 70s.
Oh,
George
yes.
Clinton, I mean, we were bumping to that in
yes, indeed. Flashlight, P-Funk, yes.
Oh, yeah. And so George Clinton was the embodiment of that kind of aesthetic. And this movie, like you said, it's primarily the province of like avant-garde thinkers and academics and certain artists and other performers. But if you talk about the masses, they kind of became aware of it, though. I always tell it when Wakanda dropped in 2018.
Right.
That was where that ethos is. And appreciation for that aesthetic is in the audience or in our community. And so that is where it began to reach way more many people. That was kind of like, you could say, the atomic bomb moment of this interest in the future and science fiction and these other kind of concepts. And so it's slowly but surely getting out there as it's making its way through exhibitions, museums, and documentaries that are coming out.
Well, again, going back to what you're talking with Black Panther. Now, first off, I was never like a comic book buff to begin with as a kid, so I really wasn't aware of a lot of the Marvel characters. And so I didn't even know of anything of the Black Panther or that they had a character that was considered black, if you will. And interestingly enough, when they put the movie together, it wound up outgrossing every other Marvel character movie. And they didn't expect that. That was not expected. As usual, it was not.
I wasn't surprised. I mean, I remember at the time when there was a local organizer for the Million Man March, they were shocked at that too.
Correct.
that was organized online. And the Black Panther character, instance of that character, was developed in New York City by the Marvel character Jack Kirby, who was influenced by what's going on in the civil rights movement at that time, with the appearance of the Black Panther Party, which at first was in Lowndes County, Alabama, and later Huey Newton and them kick off on the West Coast. And he's only really like several blocks away from Sun Ra, who's creating some of his own music at the time.
Right.
So that was an important moment in comic history with the creation of that character. And in the 70s, as a 70s kid, we only had a few black comic superheroes, and I thought there were about three of them. There was Luke
That's
Cage,
correct.
which was one of my guys, the Falcon, which people got exposed to recently, and Black Panther, and then there was only really one black woman, Storm, with the X-Men. And so yeah, those were like really the four primary black comic characters of the 70s. So when Panther came out, that was really, for a lot of people, almost like a multi-generational family thing where you had grandparents and parents taking their kids to go see it.
That is correct. And see, again, because I really wasn't that much into, I mean, I knew Spider-Man, and of course everybody knew Superman and Batman and Robin and Green Hornet, like Hulk and all, but I didn't realize Black Panther, not let alone that, Black Panther was symbolic of a black comic character. And now you just named three more. So you said it was about four. But as usual, we were overshadowed, and then once we were unleashed, we surpass.
Oh yeah, and part of that moment of that film coming out, it was interesting how much of it became a community moment. I mean, I know there were churches that went to go see it. I remember for the opening night. I remember at the previous school I was teaching at in St. Louis. I was at Harris Stowe State University. I reserved the largest theater there in the city for Harris Stowe to go see it opening night. And what was so funny, you had then black students calling from PWIs in the city, predominantly white institutions. I said, hey, can we come?
That's
and
right.
we said, all right, Shooty, y'all black, y'all can come too. And so,
that's right.
and so, yeah, it turned into, it became a community event that night. So, I mean, there was
But see, that's where, as an educator and one who is constantly trying to help our people understand our people, as well as other folks, this is where, in terms of our history, as I said, being downplayed and us not really understanding and knowing our history, and then once it comes out, then folks get a chance to say, oh, we are, I mean, like for me, working with middle schoolers and elementary school kids who are predominantly African American and Spanish, we're constantly trying to help them understand, look, don't you let anybody tell you that you're not somebody or something because of the color of your skin or your ethnic background. And it's just that it's so much about our history and everything that we just don't know that is so great. And then when you get a movie like, because this is the other piece of a Black Panther type phenomena, you have many people of all races that actually think Wakanda is a place.
Oh yeah, that
is real. I mean, it was a fictional place, but people now took that as Wakanda is an actual place.
And so it created some interesting dialogue around that in terms of people wanting to know more about their history. And I would say for these young people, that movie was like kind of like for us back in the 70s when our parents probably had us watch Roots.
Right. That's right.
Of becoming interested in our past and some issues related to that, and that's why when last summer on TikTok and others, man, when Chadwick Boseman unexpectedly passed away, so many young kids were devastated.
Well, I was right along with him because I had seen, there's only a couple of his movies I haven't seen. I haven't seen Ma Rainey and I haven't seen him play James Brown, but I hear he was masterful as James Brown.
Oh, he was great.
And I didn't see, but I did see Jackie Robinson. I did see
Black
Panther. As a matter of fact, I have a Black Panther doll in my office at my school, and I have a Black Panther doll in my office at home. I was really, and I have a little plush Black Panther rides with me in my car. That's how taken I was with the movie. When I remember going to Toys R Us and the doll was sold out, I could not find it. I literally went from Toys R Us to Toys R Us till I found a store that had it in stock. And like I said, I have one. It's in my office in my school, and it's also in my home. The Black Panther, and I've never done that for any movie. Character.
And I can see why it appealed to you. Like I said, see, for educators, especially to me, Black educators, our job for young Black people is to instill in them. We help, along with parents and some type of other, to me personally, spiritual development. It's our job to put in them the cultural and intellectual vibranium that helps them be resilient to deal with, changes in their life, or just to deal with life in period. And if you remember, vibranium was that almost unbreakable metal.
Correct.
That is mined and was mined in Wakanda at the time. And so, there are so many threads from that movie that people draw from. Now, my favorite character in particular was Killmonger.
Right.
In public at work, we got to act like T'Challa, but we walking around with Killmonger inside of us a lot of us.
I know that's right.
No,
that's absolutely right. And even there was only one Caucasian character in that film.
Oh, the CIA guy.
Yes.
They had that one white hero probably make the movie.
Right.
So,
but everything else in there, and again, I think that was a wonderful reflection as well. And again, the fact that the movie did as well, again, unexpected, because it's like anything else, the expectation, and it's sad, because that's why we talk about the way, and that's why I love what you're doing in terms of, Afrofuturism and everything that we got going on, the Astro-Blackness and everything, because it really is, it's kind of like whenever we do what we do in terms of being, and I tell my Caucasian brothers and sisters this all the time. Look, because I'm pro-Black does not mean I'm anti-white. I'm not trying to take anything away from you, but I am trying to help folks understand how great we are, of which you all constantly try to put down.
Well, the thing is, the reason they're that way, Du Bois points out in his early work 100 years ago, the way they feel about themselves is usually dependent on our own social location and with respect to them. It's one of the things Du Bois said, when we move out of an assigned social position that they think we're supposed to be, it shakes up their world.
Correct.
Which is why so many of them reacted a certain way towards the election of Obama.
Correct.
Because up until the election of Obama, I remember Chris Rock was saying that in a skit once, saying that, even a poor white guy wouldn't want to be me because he's so heavily invested in being white, and I'm rich.
Right.
And so, so when Obama was elected, and as even people in the ethnic community, because they're not really one people, they're just a bunch of different ethnic people who
Correct.
look white. A lot of them, and I've dealt with well-to-do whites, and you'd be surprised how many of them despise poor white people.
You're absolutely right, because see, this is what you're right.
And they despise them because they're looking at it like, man, what, you white in America and can't make it?
Correct.
And so they have,
that's exactly right.
They have a lot of respect for Black people who make it anyway, and so they despise poor whites for not being able to make it, and they frequently manipulate them against their own interests in order to maintain or contain the aspirations of Black and brown people.
No, you're absolutely, and I'm laughing because I had a friend of mine, matter of fact, my best friend I grew up with, he said the exact same thing. He said, they'll turn around and look at, well, what's wrong with you? Why can't you make it? Like you guys, so this is what I've always said, and it's going to sound bad because I personally don't believe anybody is trash, but for the sake of, we know the term, in the Caucasian world, they allow that break between, as you just said, those who make it and those who don't. They consider quote unquote white trash.
Mm-hmm.
However, they don't allow that same break in other groups. In other words, okay, so for the African Americans who make it, we got black people who make it. And then for those who choose or whatever life brings them, you know, there's no such thing as a black trash. In their ideology, all black is trash.
Oh, yeah.
So that break really that's allowed within their group, white trash, like you just said, is not allowed in the other groups. All of them, matter of fact, the other groups fall beneath white trash.
Yeah, and so that's why we are where we are now in this country, now where democracy's become a difficult thing when we're thinking about the future, because, you know, we are a representative democracy or republic, and so now I was telling the students we're kind of at our Julius Caesar moment. See, the Romans had in their system, they had a republic too, but during a crisis, they would elect a dictator to take care of the crisis.
Correct.
And then it would go back to a republic, you know, because I guess they said even in their own system that during a crisis it's too hard to get to consensus to get anything done, so they had to turn it over to elect a charismatic authoritarian figure to get things done, and then it would go back to being a republic. And that's why there are a lot of social scientists who are betting against the country now's ability to solve anything serious because of the inability and regional conflict and politics to reach consensus.
Now, think about it in terms of just what you all do. You, Dr. Asante, Dr. Dove, and all and the various, you know, around the country, the various schools, that they actually have to have a department to study Africana Studies. And that's, again, because, and this came back over the last couple of years ago. I mean, the last year, shall I say, last few months. Back in February for Black History Month, you actually had now some states and school districts gave them the option of opting out to teach, Black history or critical race theory, or they could opt out. I said, well, I don't remember being able to opt out of learning about, Christopher Columbus and learning about, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. I don't remember opting out of that. So the fact that we have to do this still says there are folks who don't want to know about us. And if they don't want to know, they're not going to teach it. And so for those of us who are that, we won't learn about us unless we make a conscious decision to learn about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the whole critical race theory debate. And here's why it's important. The foremost intellectual that developed that was Derek Bell. His critical race theory comes out of legal studies. He was a former African-American law professor at Harvard. He passed away about a decade ago. And his book I believe it's called Gospel Memoirs or Gospel. He has the short story Space Traders in there. And the reason critical race theory is such an important thing, it deals with the Constitution. Now, the law is the software of a society. And the amendments that we've made to the Constitution, they're like the updates you get on your phone. And so, but what critical race theory talks about really is how white Americans set up the software in this country to always benefit them.
Correct.
And so the fact that if you introduce that in the public education, if that's taught more broadly, how the Constitution plus all of these amendments was written specifically to benefit the accumulation of wealth by white men in particular, because poor white men that without land and later blacks and women we're the amendments.
Correct. That's right.
Like the updates to the phone.
That's right. I like the way you put that. We were the amendments. You're right.
Yeah. And those amendments are, kind of like how your phone gets updated. So right now it's like they trying to run things like, like it's still Windows 95. And the software won't work anymore. And critical race theory really looks at how these laws, that's how you get the new Jim Crow, all of these policies. The law is the software of the society. And when you got an idea or a theory that looks at how that works to the benefit of one group, that's going to become threatening to some people.
Correct. And that is an excellent analogy in terms of, and that's one we can relate to in terms of software and updates. And you're absolutely right. We're trying to work in an old operating system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an old operating system that was used to benefit a specific group within one gender even, because, white men without land or property couldn't even vote until the middle of the 19th century almost.
Correct.
It was for white men who owned things. It was how the country was set up.
Absolutely right. And that's a key point. And it's a key point worth repeating, that it was written for Caucasian or white men who owned things, not for those who didn't. But that's how it was set up, and we're still we're trying to go back to that. I was just saying, it's real. I mean, over the last years, particularly for after the 2016, 2017 that election, the clock has been trying to go back to that from that point on, and that's why we're in the mess we're in today as well.
Well, that's why there's a serious political movement around that issue. You ought to look up the term, what they call the Dark Enlightenment, and what that is billionaires like Peter Thiel, who happens to be a gay white man out of Silicon Valley, who was a mentor to Mark Zuckerberg. There's a group of primarily white men in this country that want to go back to a form of representative government so that on paper will still be, somewhat a republic, but they want to do it without, like pre-civil rights era.
Right.
Okay, so that's why you see all these foundations, ultra-right foundations, that basically send memos to one of the political parties to tell them how to vote on issues and how to. And it's been slowly going on since the 70s in terms of how to slow the advancement of a more, the idea or concept of a more perfect union.
Right.
So they want to go to a much more elitist form of government without the civil rights protections, which is why you say, no, we won't be slaves, but they'll take over. They're going to make it harder for us to vote.
Well, that's already started exactly. That's started as we can see.
Yeah, and so but I already told people that no, that's not going to happen. I mean, we got more to work with now.
Right.
And so
I said that earlier. That's why I'm laughing. I said, that's not going to happen today.
No, I mean, we're not going for that.
No.
So, I mean, it won't be the United States anymore. So or what's really to help people understand what's happening. When you hear, this is what it means when you see on the mainstream, they understand it. The tension hadn't been like this since the 1850s. I think what has happened to especially a lot of white liberals, they realize that some of their kinfolk are crazy.
Right.
And so you have this dynamic now where you actually got black people supporting the FBI now to go after white supremacists.
Right.
Because as a lot of people now acknowledge they are a national security threat.
Correct.
And so similar to the Civil War, once white people in the country couldn't work things out, what happened? They had to emancipate the enslaved Africans, and 200,000 of them joined the Union, and then proceed to march south and turn them into extra crispy and extra spicy.
Right.
And burned everything down. And so, and now it's back to the point now where you're seeing certain elites or a section of the white liberals are now recognizing, okay, we're going to have to get together with black and brown and Asian people to beat this thing back. Well, which is why they're saying it hasn't been like this since the Civil War era.
But it's, again, to me, that's a historical pattern. In terms of, I was just sharing with some students yesterday, real brief synopsis of the Tuskegee Airmen. In terms of the Tuskegee Airmen, actually, and I love that line from the movie, we weren't assigned, we were requested.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, now the Tuskegee Airmen, that was for the brothers that had a college education.
Right.
Now, the brothers that didn't have a college education, there's an interesting thing. If you research, I think it was the French First Army. And what that was composed of were primarily poor Black Americans, and they were ended up assigned to the French First Army, which was composed of the Senegalese people from Senegal, and they fought together in North Africa, and then later involved with the invasion of Italy. And when I was younger in college, when I talked to the parent of one of my friends who was a World War II vet, he said the thing he liked about World War II was that he got a chance to invade Italy. And and it was like, I was like, well, why is that? He said, because during the 1930s, the Pope had blessed the invasion of Ethiopia. And so the Africans and Blacks were happy to invade Italy at the time and kicked a lot of butt going up the Italian Peninsula. And so, and that experience, going, as you said, these historical patterns of the Civil War and World War II is why, and then jazz is first introduced to Europe in World War I. But then World War II is why Black Americans have a certain type of different mentality than other Black ethnic formations. And I explained to some friends, and this because I've gone and lectured on Afrofuturism in Europe and how African Americans really are galvanized on this thought. And I shared with some Germans. I said, I'm not intimidated, y'all. My grandparents came over here and kicked y'all butt twice. So y'all ain't nothing special, And so just think about how many Black boys, if they understood that link between politics, history, and culture, would stand up a little bit straighter.
And that's the goal, because
if they understood where they stood in relation to this thing. That's why we're not intimidated by some little old people trying to storm the Capitol on January 6th, because the real smart people would know, like, if we really unleash Killmonger from Newark and turned him loose on you.
That's exactly right.
Or take Killmonger from Camden and we turn him loose on you or her on you. Oh, there'd be a different kind of conversation going on.
Oh, my God, I had to turn the mic button off because I'm sitting here rolling, and you are absolutely right. You are absolutely 100% correct. And that's that. And all right, my school is an all-boys school. It's a leadership academy. And that's exactly what we try to help them understand. Once you understand your history, you can't help but stand up straighter. When you, and it is so true in terms of what you just said. If, and that's why I said earlier, I said, no, that's not going to happen, because I honestly believe Killmonger is going to come back out. It's going to come out. Now, this is my question, going back to you again when I was talking about the masses. Now, you don't know what you don't know. And you have so many of us who are just trying to survive right now. So whenever you start talking about, why don't you do some research into your history or your ancestry, they're looking at me like, man, look, I'm just trying to get food on the table. I don't have no time for all that. How do we get this, what we're talking about now, out?
Oh, man. We've always had that in us, those people, where their sense of time, how they locate themselves in time. That's why when you add into the average cat, they'll be like, man, I'm just day to day.
Right.
They don't. And people who think like that is because they've never had somebody help spur or develop them a vision. Because a vision will help get you through some tough times.
Amen.
Like I told somebody when they talk about going through the valley of the shadow of death, you're going through. You ain't stopping to wallow in your mess.
Correct.
You're supposed to be going through, and that it's not going to last all the time. But it's the vision that gets you through the valley, that light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And for so many of our people, they don't even know where the light switch is.
Right.
And that's where aspects of education and, to me, some type of spiritual development comes in, and where you get the insights to see something that you can't see physically, but you see it in your mind.
Right.
Where that if you with an idea with initiative and intuitiveness, you're going to eventually achieve your objective, which then during that time is also going to build character. And so that's where some of that sentiment comes from, I believe.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm always excited to have conversations like this. One, it affirms my vision and everything that I've been given and what I'm charged to do in working with the African American, Hispanic, people of color boys. I'm trying to help them and their families, because it's not just about the students. It's also about helping their parents understand this too, because that's why I'm asking the questions that I'm asking based on my experiences in terms of, Mr. Medley, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just trying to get food on the table. But once they understand, like you said, that vision, not only will you be able to put food on the table, you're going to be able to impact generations to come.
Well, think about it like this. During the pandemic, which the last Spanish, the Harlem Renaissance came about in the wake of the last great pandemic, Spanish flu. And then several years later, Harlem Renaissance takes off. I believe in the wake of this pandemic, when it's over, you're going to see something else pop off. I know the social scientists are saying probably right around 2024. Because when you think about it, the pandemic, remember we were in quarantine and all, that forced a lot of us for the first time in years to be still.
Correct.
And when people were still, they had time to think.
Correct.
And I always tell people that book, even if it's not an Africana Studies book, that Think and Grow Rich book.
Right.
The biggest thing about that book is dealing with thought process, which is why I recommend people, you ought to cross-pollinate that book with Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro.
That's right. I couldn't agree more.
And then the third book you ought to read with that is How to Win Friends and Influence People. So,
Dale Carnegie. That's right.
Yeah. So then you think about your thought process, figure out how you've been miseducated, and then you figure out how to go win allies and do something.
Go ahead. Say that again. No. Go back through that progression again.
Okay. The first book, Think and Grow Rich, you're not necessarily just rich in money like that, but the first thing it says is think and then grow.
Correct.
So you're looking at your thought process. Then in Miseducation of the Negro, you're looking at, okay, how has all this bad information that I've had previously messed up my previous thoughts? And then How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay, now how do I go get the people to help me succeed at whatever I'm doing? Those three things there will help adjust your own kind of personal software. You're rewriting a code.
I know that's right. What you just said was powerful. And for listening audience, I hope you caught what Dr. Anderson was saying, because he just kind of gave you, and I've read all three of those books, as well as our other Afro brother who did it for black folk, Think and Grow Rich, a black choice, Dennis Kimbrough, and he was on the show some years ago. Another Alpha brother, he took Think and Grow Rich and now tailored it to the African American community. Matter of fact, I think they get ready to make a movie out of that. Think and Grow Rich, a black choice. But think about what Dr. Anderson just said. The thinking, and then figuring out how you've been miseducated. And then how do I now build my allies, my network, my posse, my boys, my hood, my group, whatever y'all call it. How do I build that up?
Mm-hmm. And they've even updated that book, How to Win Friends and Influence in the Digital Era. That's correct. Mm-hmm. And so this network I've built called BSAM was really applying those principles, but I had to have, one of the things a PhD does, when the ones that are really good, that know what they're doing, right, it gives you time to think, okay, and then figure out some things, and then make some moves, which is why I always tell people that if you have somebody with a PhD in your classroom and they cannot execute the idea outside the classroom, you might need to take another instructor for certain topics or whatever, because like I told, to me, a business professor should be able to teach you how to create something. If he can't create anything, he's basically a work professor. Right.
That's right. Good point.
He should know something about how entrepreneurship works and some other things. And so, how do you, and so these are things that, I think as Carter G. Woodson who was a contemporary of Du Bois, put out, how do you properly use wealth and resources in terms of what's around you?
Correct.
To make some things happen. So when I run into kids, but when it's happened during the pandemic here, so many young people, they figured out how to use their technology to earn a living, like whether it's on Instagram, whatever. And they're like, oh man, I could make this as much money doing this. I'd rather have this than a 9-to-5.
Right.
And which is why, and because so many of them are making these alternative choices now, that's why you see now the wages go up because they're having a harder time attracting labor.
Correct.
For some of these other jobs, because I think the young people, they call it the YOLO economy for them. You only live once.
Yeah. And
so they're like, I will take a chance on myself rather than being under someone's direct supervision, because I know what that's like.
Right.
9 to 5, I'm gonna bet on myself, to do some things. So that's just one example how during this pandemic, and I've seen it at the grassroots level, underground kind of thing, where there's a lot of experimentation going on now.
Right.
In terms of, and if I were you all, I'm familiar with entrepreneurship and creativity and deal with that, but there are people way, way bigger than I am. Now, if you think this is not big, then why is Carnegie Hall doing a whole festival on Afrofuturism in February and March early next year?
All right now.
And so, I've told some friends, you need to identify some people who are involved in this stuff and figure out what are the political and economic ramifications of that, because, I'm old enough to remember two things when there was a study done at Harvard where they were trying to figure out how to take over black music.
Right.
And then I used to work with a friend of mine, Butch Hartfield, during the golden age of hip-hop, as they call it, late 80s, early 90s, where we're doing all this stuff, promotion. We didn't even call it being a street team back then. We were just hanging up Domino's pizza flyers to pay for the little half-hour hip-hop show we had in Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
And the issue was there were no elders around to teach us the business principles of how to control what we were out there creating. And,
right.
One of the things with the Black Speculative Arts Movement, we've put out the scholarship heavy first. The ideas, what they're about. And then we put a movement which we've been networking around the world, going back.
Right.
There's a certain limitation on social media. I said, no, I'm going to just get into my pocket. I'm going to go meet these brothers, whether they in Lagos, Johannesburg, Toronto, because, you find you can identify each other on the social media, but there's still nothing that replaces a handshake and sitting down over some coffee or something.
That's right.
Build the network. And now institutionalizing those concepts, which is why, when people, in the academic sphere who study Afrofuturism, when they found out I was coming to Temple to work with Malefi Asante,
right?
Oh man, some people got shook. My former president that worked for me, who's at another university, said, "Oh Lord," they said they bring him Westbrook to the Lakers. Because that's the. I love my previous school, but I was like, shoot, the only thing I could ever do was get them to the playoffs. I never had to get to the championship.
That's right.
So,
I know that's right, and we ain't mad at you.
So, when they heard I was going, when Malefi hired me, it's like, hey, Westbrook's going to play with LeBron. So.
Like I said, we not mad at you.
Yeah, and so that's why you'll hear more about this stuff in media. It's already happening in the entertainment field, but we're in a very good position now. Like with my friend from college, big time visual artist involved with a lot of the stuff related to comics, John Jennings, Stacey Robinson, whose art is gotten really big in this area. Latrice Gaskins, and that's somebody you ought to bring to your school. This sister's so tough. She deals with, she's a digital scientist, but she shows you how to use AI, artificial intelligence, in terms with making things or visual art. And her work's going to be down at the Smithsonian.
Well, you definitely got to get, we'll stay in touch. We have each other's email address, and, we serve with UWP together. But yeah, definitely drop that name on me, because especially now that we can do, over the pandemic, we learned how to do everything virtually. So we're in the past in terms of, folks will always think about, well, how am I going to get you there, transportation, this, that, and the other. We don't have to worry about that now. We can do it on Zoom or Google or whatever. So yeah, definitely. In terms of drop names like that, because I have a bunch of boys who are artists and digital artists who want to be engineers and do that type of work. So that would, I know that would be a great session for them to see, like I say, even if we had to do it on Zoom.
And that's why I believe in the wake of the pandemic, I think, and we got to have the breakthrough, because we don't have a choice, because what's facing us, so we're talking to Afrofuturism now. In history, if you study history, which Malcolm said, if you really want to figure out some things, the first thing to start with is history.
Correct.
In the history of the world, a plague by itself has been enough to bring down a civilization.
Correct.
Like what they called the Black Plague.
Right.
And there was the Antonine Plague that hit the Roman Empire, and it was never the same after the Antonine Plague. A plague by itself is enough to bring something down, a civilization. Which is why they kind of shook, why they know they got to vaccinate the world.
Right.
But no one has ever had to deal with a plague and then climate change.
Correct.
Coming in on them at the same time. And then you combine that with technological acceleration, where they had this concept called Moore's Law, where every 18 months information doubles, which was done by this scientist in the 60s, you notice with computer chips, they had the ability to accelerate. And, that's why every 18 months your phone starts, acting funny. You got to get an update.
Right.
Well, now they're saying we're in Moore's Law Plus, where you got to update every 6 months now. That's why you talk to some of your church friends now, they can't put together a budget.
That's right.
For more than 6 months out.
That's right.
Because we're in the era of Moore's Law Plus. They don't know what's going to happen. They can't forecast ahead of 6 months. So that's why it feels like we're living life fast forward now. Even January 6th, they said it almost seems like a long time ago.
Right.
Because of the relationship between technology and how so much stuff has moved up onto platforms now, like getting stuff DoorDash, working remotely.
Correct.
All of these things, how they can even update vaccines now because of RNA. And in St. Louis where they map the genome, that's why a lot of people now need to go through a basic 6th grade biology class to figure out why they should take their butt and get a vaccination.
Correct.
Because, technology is moving so fast now. So you have technological acceleration, climate change, and the plagues. There's a book called The Coming Plagues. Laurie Garrett wrote it, saying that these plagues are going to continue to come because of globalization. So there'll be a COVID-29 or something like that or whatever.
Right. And see, and you're, again, this is, to me, what you just said was another powerful point in terms of combinations. And like you were just saying, the plague, technological advancement, and climate change. Now, I don't I know I hadn't until you just said that. I had never put the three of those together. But now that you said that and I processed it, you're right. That's a lot going on at once that is causing us, because we're constantly, every Saturday morning I get on here and say, wow, I can't believe another 7 days have gone by that quickly. I'm only up here once a week, but it feels like I'm up here all 7. But what you just said is probably why we're all feeling that feeling of time seems to be going by faster than ever.
Yeah, and so that's why I tell y'all young people, if I were y'all, man, if I did it all already, I'd probably major in environmental science. That's a job that will probably be useful here. They're going to be new majors popping up.
Right.
And so that's why the only thing to explain this moment is Afrofuturism. Because it's happening so fast, it seems to be one of the ideas that has all of these motifs of science, technology, climate, and so forth. where it takes something like a Wakanda to even imagine how to deal with it.
That's right.
So we need to, to have all those things going on just to deal with what's happening in terms of the pace that we're dealing with. And this goes back to, Curtis Mayfield put a song out, 2 songs in the late 20th century. In the early 70s, there was a song that was kind of a response to what that writer Alvin Toffler put out. He had a song called Future Shock,
right,
which was how people coming back from Vietnam. And then on his last album he put out in the mid-90s, Internet's Break It Out, and it was called A New World Order.
That's right.
And so that's why I said, if you go back and listen to what Curtis Mayfield was putting down, what they would call conscious soul, and looking at it, because a lot of our art is if you go back and look at it, kind of can interpret this moment to a certain extent.
Right.
Which is why it's a sad, them taking music out of the schools.
We'll be talking another hour on that. And because I'm a musician. Matter of fact, the music that's playing behind us is my original music. The music that I use for our background music are from original CDs that I put together. You were talking about George Clinton earlier. And George Clinton, you had Stevie Wonder, James Brown, Bob Marley. You can go down the list of folks who were making social commentary in their music.
And if we still had music in the schools, I believe we'd have a George Clinton for this Afrofuturistic moment, because they took the music out.
Correct.
Here we are.
You're absolutely right. I had last night. I was at an Omega service for one of our brothers who passed away, and one of our brothers was my band director when I was in high school, and we were having this very same conversation last night about taking music out in school, because the high schools are struggling to get kids to play in bands because none of them know how to play instruments, because music was taken out of schools. And the band director, Brother Nelson, he and I were talking last night, and we had this exact same conversation. And you are so right in terms of if you never know, because again, in terms of sparking kids' creativity, and there's no doubt in my mind you would have another George Clinton coming through.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, or Prince.
Oh, right. Prince was another one. I mean, I got a whole story on Prince. It'll take me too long to tell it. But Prince was one of the most talented musicians that came through. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like him in the beginning. That's part of the story. But man, after Purple Rain, I was sold.
Oh yeah. It was my aunt as a kid. Ninth grade introduced me to this album. And my aunt is 85, and and that album.
That's correct.
Soft and wet.
Yep. Yep.
When he came out there, and I see this kind of guy with his hair looking, I'm like, who is this? So
when Prince came,
it was on vinyl.
Right, that's right. Because I'm telling you, when Prince first came out, I had nothing and I'm a musician. I had nothing for Prince to do. But after Purple Rain, I couldn't get enough of Prince, because a lot of his stuff was way out there too. But he was speaking to these times. Matter of fact, one of his songs is "Sign of the Times." So you're absolutely. Matter of fact,
and a good example sometimes where there's some young cats out there. That's why I wish there was like Charlie Parker.
Right.
He comes from Kansas City. When he gets to New York, Dizzy Gillespie.
Correct.
And we're trying to come up with a new sound, and then Charlie Parker showed up. And he became the Cat.
Correct.
With bebop and all that, and then of course them, that era, then John Coltrane. Correct. And Alice Coltrane.
That's right.
So, that's why I'm so glad that my father, when I was young, took us out to. They had a place down there in D.C., and they were doing it up and down the coast where during the summer you could see free concerts. I mean, that's how I was introduced to Ahmad Jamal.
Right.
And all these different people from the 70s. And that's why I tell a lot of these young cats, I said, man, y'all just don't know what you were not exposed to because of budget cuts, because it'd be, so that's why I think there's a good shot you're going to see a new thing, a new sound coming out over the next few years. But right now it's kind of in the experimental process.
Right.
Because now the kids are just making the stuff on their own with the technology. whatever. But the key is because it's much harder to become a mass hit now than when George was doing it.
That's absolutely, and I've had George's niece on years ago, and I'm still in contact with her. I know his niece. I know George's niece. As a matter of fact, they just celebrated. I don't know if it was his birthday or something. They just celebrated not too long ago. But to this day, I remember P-Funk and Flashlight and all of their stuff. Matter of fact, I was in 8th grade when Flashlight came out. And so I remember that well. P-Funk, we're going to turn this mother out. And but I tell you what, we have come down to the end. I do want you to take a couple minutes to talk about your role at Universal Right. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then
okay.
And then what I want you to do is I'm going to turn the mic off. As a matter of fact, talk about Universal Right, and then flow right on into promoting everything that you do, how folks can get in touch with you, any of the books that you have out, any book signings, where you're going to be, if you want to promote Temple with the Africana Studies, anything with the exception of a dollar amount. At that point, the mic is yours to promote anybody you want to shout out. I'm going to turn the mic off and allow you that opportunity right now.
Okay. As the editorial director at Universal Right Press, it's a new press. A new black-owned press. Sister is the CEO of it, as you previously mentioned, Ayo Sakai. And our mission is to promote African-centered social science books to, I think, and this new black press is dedicated to that proposition, to put out excellence in scholarship. And one of the things we're working on a project right now that's getting ready to come out is on critical race theory, that you will see early next year with some of the best writers in the country contributing to that volume. So and plus I know Dr. Asante has a book out, him and Dr. Dove, called Being Human. So they're going to see some very Afrocentric progressive literature being produced by Universal UWP coming out over the next 2 to 3 years that I think is going to be a part of this agenda of redirecting how we think about where we want to go in the future. Beyond that, with a lot of the concepts that I've been talking to with Marc today, if you want some more insight on it, I'd recommend you getting the book Afrofuturism 2.0, The Rise of Astro-Blackness. That is with Lexington Press. And then the follow-up anthology, The Black Speculative Arts Movement, Black Futurity, Art+Design. And I guess the analogy you could think about what those books mean is kind of like the same way Alan Locke's book, The New Negro, that came out in the 1920s. These two books collectively are kind of like for the new black person early in the 21st century. And I'll be in the area a lot. I'm the graduate director of the #1 Department of Africology and African American Studies in the nation. We're about to celebrate 30 years of being able to offer the PhD at the doctoral level in the Black Studies discipline. And if you, any aspiring young scholars out there, want to figure out how to be the next Bell Hooks or next W. Du Bois, you're more than welcome to apply at our department and see how we do things at Temple University. And I'd like to thank Marc for the opportunity at this time to come share thoughts with his listeners. And you can kind of follow what we're doing with the Black Speculative Arts Movement at the website BSAM-art.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Hardcore888. I'm on Twitter. We always, or follow the hashtag on Twitter, Afrofuturism, and see where all these ideas that Marc and I have been coming up with and talking about, and how I think you're seeing the new vanguard of intellectual discussion of our community emerging. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you. And now, those of you, like I said, now I'm biased, and I know Brother Carter is biased, and I know Brother Anderson is biased, but Alpha, each one of the fraternities and sororities, they kind of have their own kind of like little, what they're known for. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's necessarily true because we all work together. We're all about the same thing, but we tease and razz each other all the time. So as you can tell from this discussion, the alphas, needless to say, are known as intellectuals. The alphas are the bookworms. The alphas are known as the smart ones, the ones with the glasses ones, the nerds, this, that, and the other. That's what the alphas are. Then you have Omega Sci-Fi, the Qs. They're the dogs, the Q dogs, and that's what they're known. Then you have the Kappa Alpha side. They're the pretty boys, and on down the line. We can go on down the line. But clearly this morning, you can see from this discussion why the alphas are known as intellectuals.
As a joke, man, I was teasing my former president, man, because I got so many Kappa brothers I'm really cool with. But we used to tease them. I know Dr. Dwan Womack, who's president of Claflin down in South Carolina. When he became president of my last university, I was teasing him, I'm a professor without tenure yet. And I said, man, you know what, brother, I'm so proud that the Kappas are graduating from college now. Yeah, I'm proud of y'all. And I said, and that's why as an alpha man, I'm going to make sure you're successful to keep moving up towards the light.
I know that's right.
Whatever.
Onward and upward toward the
onward
light.
And upward. And I'm very proud of my association with the men of Omega and a brother that's like a son to me, a member of Phi Beta Sigma, who's a young leader in his own right, named Ryan Branson L. Now, I don't know what those iota things, so that's something that happened after I left college. I don't know
right,
what that is.
That's right.
So, when I went to college, they didn't exist on our campus.
That's correct.
At that time. So, but yeah, collectively, and all jokes aside, man, I see some Kappa men out there doing some amazing things, and I'm hoping this young brother named Street is the next U.S. Senator out of Pennsylvania. Here.
All right now.
He's very, 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 very sharp, So, and so, I mean, they're doing some things there now, so, yeah.
I know that's right, man. I know that's right. And matter of fact, speaking of presidents, Temple's new president is African American. Temple, they're newly elected president.
Yes. I think it was Jason Wingard. I hope I didn't get his name wrong.
Right, and he if you do, it's all right because he just got there. Literally, he just got there like maybe a few weeks ago. But Temple has a black president, a university president at this moment. So, there's definitely some movement there, good movement.
And so that's what's kind of going around the country now in terms of the society. There are aspects of the society know that we're going to have to make some space for people with talent because it's not going to be contained anymore. And I also want to basically leave this message too. There are plenty of white folks around there that do not believe in the doctrine of white supremacy. We have.
That's right.
Yeah, and they will be, and sometimes they will be more forthright than even some people of our own community that's too scared to speak up.
Oh, absolutely. And see, that's why I always make it very clear and make the disclaimer or whatever you want to call it. This is not about white bashing. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that. However, as Naeem Akbar can say, Caucasian greatness is everywhere you turn. So there's no reason why we as African Americans, people of color, can't have our greatness around as well. So it's not about white bashing. It's not about that. But it is about, as I said, because you're pro-black does not mean you're anti-white. And so none of these movements could have gotten off the ground or made it had some Caucasians been in there pushing it as well. Maybe be very clear about that.
Even in BSAM, I always tell people, I got my John Brown crew now. Supports what I'm doing. Y'all can study on your own who John Brown was. He's one of my heroes.
Go ahead. I hear you.
And so, but here's the thing where even how, in fact, some of black professionals. I remember my spouse. She's a physician. I'm lucky enough to be married to a woman of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
All right now.
She's doing residency, and she's mad because how she's getting treated at work or whatever. And I teased her one day because, I was like, now, if you keep bringing this home to me because I'm not as polished as you are. I'm going to go up to your workplace and I'm going to go off and it's going to embarrass you or whatever because I have no problem with going putting people in their place. I said, y'all making it hard for me to watch my football in peace. So I said, you know what you mad about? And this goes to a lot of some of them black professionals listening to the show. You mad because white folks let you down. That's what you really mad about because you thought you were so educated and so blessed that you weren't like some of the less fortunate people in our community, and you really mad because they let you down. That's right. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? My white folks have never let me down. Right. Because my expectations are not normally that high. So whenever they do the right thing, I'm pleasantly surprised. And so it's been my own people let me down.
I know that's right. I told you, I'm glad I got a mic button. I'm glad I got a mic button because I'm sitting here rolling. I'm in tears. But you're absolutely right. Absolutely.
So my thing is, once you know who you are, whatever, man, like I had to say at a conference, I said, look, based upon my accomplishments, most of y'all are not my intellectual peers.
That's correct.
Y'all just here listening to what I'm talking about, but we colleagues, but shoot, I'm NBA and you what D-League.
I know that's right. Oh my God, you calling it? Yes.
That's Alpha Phi Alpha coming out. So
that's Alpha Phi Alpha Killmonger and all of them. That's right.
Alpha Phi Alpha and Killmonger. That's a lethal combination. Because I was in the United States Marine Corps.
Oh, see, there you go. I was Air Force.
So what are the Marines? So, man, please. And they know we're out here. And that's why they work day and night to present certain type of people.
That's right.
And you don't have a Marc Medley or Reynaldo Anderson. You get some pie mouth talking cat that is not even sounding logical.
That's right.
To have their own talk shows on cable TV. And I think, what did I explain to my daughter? I said, I'll take her back to the Old Testament. I said, look, these are the magicians that work for Pharaoh.
Right.
And they try to still keep the people confused. But, the time is coming where the magicians don't work anymore.
I know that's right. And I know that's right. But when we meet face to face, you say, I have a whack sense of humor. And so what you've been saying the last couple of minutes has me in tears sitting here. I'm so glad I got a mic button and it's not TV. But it's in comic and in jest, but it's true. It's absolutely true. So for those of you, I hope you've been with me since 6, but I certainly hope you've been with me since 7. My guest this morning has been my good brother in the fraternity, my good brother that we've served together on Universal Right Publications. He's editorial director. I'm on the advisory board. But Dr. Reynaldo Anderson, had a blast chatting him. This was deep. As my other good brother that listens, Wardell Carter, can say, we were on the deep end of the pool today. No question we were on the deep end of the pool. So, again, it's going to be archived on my YouTube channel. For those that didn't catch it this morning, they can catch it there. For those who did, you can share it. Go to my YouTube channel and share it on your social media sites. But with that being said, my good brother, Dr. Reynaldo Anderson, you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for rising like a Sphinxman and joining me this morning.
All right, big brother, do you want some donuts?
So we're on. Yes, that's exactly right. That's the next order of the day. But in any event, thank you so much. And we'll be in touch because we're both on. We're both affiliated with Universal Right, so we'll be in touch. And again, some of those folks that that you think would benefit talking to my boys at my school, and you for that matter, I can have you talk to them as well. And maybe we can make that happen again through Google or Zoom or what have you. But thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Have a wonderfully blessed day. As they say, grand rising.
All right. Hey, black skies and gold moon.
Yes, indeed. All right now. Take care.
All right. Take care.
All right. Well, that ends. Like I say, you really had me going at the end. Hilarious, but true. But that ends another episode of The Reading Circle with Marc Medley. My guest this morning was Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated brother, Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Studies at Temple University, and the Executive Editor at Universal Right Publications, none other than Dr. Reynaldo Anderson.